آج میں سورہ کہف کی 2 آیات، آیت نمبر 22 اور آیت نمبر 23 کا پڑھنے کا شرف حاصل کرنا چاہوں گا، اور جس میں ہم کو انشاءاللہ کہنے کی تلقین کی گئی ہے حضور کی طرف سے۔ اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان اللعین الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ ولا تلقولن لشیء انی فاعل ذلک غدا الا ان یشاء اللہ واذکر ربک اذا نسیت وقل عسى ان یهدینا ربی لاقرب من ھذا رشدا۔ اس کا اردو ترجمہ پہلے پڑھ دوں میں۔ اور کسی کام کی نسبت نہ کہا کرو کہ میں اس کو کل کر دوں گا مگر انشاءاللہ کہہ کر، اور اگر انشاءاللہ کہنا بھول جاؤ تو جب یاد آئے اپنے پروردگار کو یاد کر لو اور انشاءاللہ کہہ لو، اور کہو کہ امید ہے کہ میرا پروردگار مجھے ایسی بات کی ہدایت فرمائے گا جو رہنمائی میں اس سے بھی زیادہ قریب ہو۔ انگریزی انگلش میں، ڈو ناٹ سے آف اینی تھنگ آئی ول ڈو اٹ ٹمارو without adding if Allah wills. When you forget, remember your Lord and say, may Allah guide me and bring me nearer to the truth. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim. Sallallahu. بسم اللہ کیجیے۔
جی مجھے اجازت ہے جی، یا کچھ اور ہونا ہے؟
جی ایک چیز، we are just recite Surah Fatiha for these marhumin, which I have sent the list recently. I will just send it to you again. The list is as follows: Sayyid Muhammad Askari Jafri, Sayyid Ali Jafri, Razia Begum, Ashraf Nisa Begum, and Jumla Mu'mineen or Mu'minat. ان کے لیے جو ہے ایک سورہ فاتحہ سے شروع کریں۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمدللہ
بسم اللہ
الرحمن الرحیم مالک یوم الدین، ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین، اہدنا الصراط المستقیم صراط الذین انعمت علیہم غیر المغضوب علیہم ولا الضالین۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، قل هو اللہ احد اللہ الصمد لم یلد ولم یولد ولم یکن له کفوا احد۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، قل هو اللہ احد اللہ الصمد لم یلد ولم یولد ولم یکن له کفوا احد۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، قل هو اللہ احد اللہ الصمد لم یلد ولم یولد ولم یکن له کفوا احد۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد۔ So Maulana, assalamu alaikum. We are just running a bit late, 10:38, so you take your own time as usual, and please start the session. Bismillah.
جزاک اللہ مصطفیٰ صاحب۔
جی شکریہ۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان اللعین الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن، الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود، فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميادان أرضه، أفضل الدين معرفته، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خير المبشرين والمنذرين، شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dearest Mu'mineen, Mu'minat, my elders, my youngers, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is my joy, my honor, my pleasure again to be able to see some of your bright faces and to continue that discussion and to have some of your wonderful attentions and ears as well. We've been talking and we have been talking and we're still on Sermon 1, but I'm moving forward into now the part about the creation of angels and the creation of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. In the interest of trying to cover a little more and in the interest of perhaps trying to keep it palatable and maybe not too heavy, of course, the infinite depths of what is said is something we can continue on with. I feel that maybe I'm guilty of rushing things, or maybe I'm guilty of going into too much detail. However, when we look at the creation part of the Tawheed, you'll notice that there are a few lines, 4 or 5 lines that I didn't go into the detail about last time, and I'll be moving on for now. The reason being mainly that we have spent many weeks or months, you could say, on the Bab of Tawheed. And of course, the Bab of Tawheed continues because in everything there is Tawheed. Amirul Mu'mineen salatu wassalamu alayhi has said that I did not see anything, I do not see any shay in which I do not see within it and outside of it and all around it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, of course, we see his ma'rifah is found in everything. What I would like to do is now take a look, and also what I'll be doing is we see that when it comes to, translating into from Arabic to English, then what happens is one may notice that when there's a few phrases, then I was trying to translate them into English and explain some of the words. Because I'll be going to more bulk matter in terms of how much Arabic there is in English, it really won't be feasible, practical, possible to translate everything. The English and Arabic translations will be there, and we'll look at them, of course, but you'll see me focusing mainly on the English in the interest of targeting our English-speaking audience, the majority of whom are the ones listening, and also in the interest of covering more material. So please allow me that and forgive that. Your valuable feedback is always beneficial to me, inshallah. I'll just be sharing that one moment as we get into it. I remember there was a problem with size. You'll let me know. Of course, your feedback will definitely let me know. On the screen, I'm probably small and this is big, which is probably the way it should be. These are the words of Amirul Mu'mineen, and I am a lover of Amirul Mu'mineen. So I am much smaller in status than any one word that emerges from his mouth. Just last Shabi Juma, I had, or was it, no, the one before, I had the honor of being at the discussion at Hussainiya Passmore, where we were talking about some things. One thing came up, and it was about, Tawheed and creation and the variations in creation. And I had been requested to mention one of the points I mentioned there. So I thought I would go over it because it ties in with what we're talking about here. And so it was suggested to me by my dear Momin brother. And so bringing it up here, it was about the fingerprint design, and really I think it applies universally to any design, because the beauty of creation is that Allah has created everything and he has categorized everything, and when he categorizes them, they have similarities. So humans, for example, are creations of Allah, so all humans have some qualities that are similar. And same thing with different types of animal species. We find similarities. Biology classifies things according to similarities. But the interesting thing to note is that everything is so different. I was listening once in my younger days. I remember listening to a majlis and an alim was speaking about Allah's creation, and he mentioned something that I stuck with me forever, and it was how everything is different. Every little piece in the universe is different, similar but different. And he said, for example, and it was talking about the physical characteristics. I mean, one time the ashab was sitting with the holiest messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Khiba, could we zoom the screen a little bit more if we possibly can?
Zoom the screen in more?
Yeah, if it's already, no, I think it's pretty much zoomed in. Yeah.
Okay, I'll scroll a bit as I move through it. So, okay, yeah, right now on my screen, this is my max. Okay. And at any point, if we're not able to see the screen, I took this deliberately from a website to make it easy access so everybody can get to there rather than a specific book. And it's alislam.org, where you will find, you just type in Nahjul Balagha, and one of the first hits on Google will be alislam.org. And right away, you'll come to this page, you'll scroll down and it's in sections. So when it comes to creation of the angels, then you'll be seeing this part there as well, if the screen size is a problem. Of course, I can coordinate with Yunus Bhai to see how I can make changes and do this better for next time. So what happens is, the alim says that even, because I mean, in Canada, here, we talk about snowflakes. And when we talk about snowflakes, we say snowflakes are beautiful. And one of the things that's beautiful about them is that people will say every snowflake is different. So when every snowflake is formed and as it falls from the sky, if you were to look at all the snowflakes that are falling, the pattern and the design on them would be different. Kind of like our fingerprints are different if we talk about the fingerprint design. So he also mentioned the leaves of a tree and the blades.
Sorry, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
Malana?
In the meanwhile, can we just recite a Surah Fatiha for all marhumin?
And also for Sayyid Mustafa Musawi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Sayyid Muhammad Askari Jafri, Sayyid Ali Jafri, Razia Begum, Ashraf Nisa Begum, and Jumla marhumin, please. Thank you.
Salam, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, beg your pardon. Somehow
Oh, we lost your voice again.
Ji, awaaz aa rahi hai meri?
Yeah.
Okay. Bilkul theek hai. Sorry about that. I think the audio, it switched. My audio just switched to a different. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And I don't think I'm sharing it now anymore. One moment. Okay, inshallah. Yunus Bhai, can you hear me now?
Yeah, just fine. Perfect.
Jazakallah. Okay. So, and also, so what we see is there is variation in design, and we'll see that over here as well. Because in Allah's creation in angels, or when we talk about Hazrat Adam and humans, variety is so important. And when he's given us variety, what that means is that there's a beauty of tolerance and a lesson of patience in variety. So everyone is different, and we have to learn to understand Allah's creation. Sometimes when we tend to label people, generalize people, show prejudice, racism, intolerance, many of these things stem from the need to have everything the same and to have people not different from us. So when we look at the, and what happens is the Prophet ﷺ is sitting and he says that, who can describe my right hand? And, you know, someone has to describe his right hand, and the ashab start describing the Prophet's right hand, and they're trying to describe, you know, the magnificence of it, perhaps. So someone is comparing it to the brightness of the moon, and someone is comparing it to the sun, and someone to the stars, and someone to light and nur, etc. Amir al-Mu'mineen salatu wassalamu alayhi walks in, and then he notices that this is what's happening, and the Prophet asks him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ask him, how would you describe my hand, O Ali? And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I would say your hand is your right hand, because it was about the right hand. He said, I would describe your right hand as the same as your left hand. So, and meaning that there's nothing that is a sample that can describe the magnificence of his hand except to compare it to his left hand. But in that, we also see a lesson that the Prophet's right hand and left hand are not different. Our right hand is for certain things and our left hand is for certain things. We do eating with our right hand and we do some cleansing with our left hand and so on. The Prophet's entire body is bak and it is free from any najasat, so it's a very different criteria. The fingerprint design is very simple, and what it says is that, and I was fascinated by this because I started looking at fingerprints, and we start by saying that, okay, every fingerprint is different. Science has accepted that every fingerprint is different. Even twins who have identical DNA, identical twins, have different fingerprints. But when you look at fingerprints, they say not only do you have different fingerprints, because if there's 7 billion people, then we're saying there's 7 billion fingerprints, but that's not actually the case. What happens is you have 10 different fingerprints. That means that this is different from this, is different from this, is different from this. And what you have on one finger, no other human being on the planet has that. And that means that if there's 7 billion people, and then you add the toes in as well, toes are there too. And I'm only talking about the tip. Fingerprint experts talk about these grooves as well, and these are also different. But in fingerprint analysis, we only take the fingertips and the thumb. So what they say is that therefore, actually that's 20 different fingerprints and thumbprint and toe prints that each human being has. Now, if you multiply that by 6 billion people in the world, or 7 billion, then you're going to get 7 times 20, which is 140 billion. That means there's 140 billion different fingerprints right now. Do you know that science likes to randomize everything? Science likes to say everything is based on chance and randomness. And what that means is that, well, the reason why everybody's fingerprints are different is because it's random. If you'll go and look at what the chances are, if you Google it, what are the chances of somebody having the same fingerprint, anyone in the world? The calculation they have is, and what's mostly quoted is 1 in 64 billion. And 1 in 64 billion is quoted because there was a fingerprint expert back in the late 1800s. In 1892, he came up with this, Francis Galton. And Francis Galton came up with this calculation, which was basically saying that, and then what evolutionary scientists used this number for was to argue that, look, see, because it's a 1 in 64 billion chance, therefore it's not going to happen. It's not because of intelligent design, because on the one side we have the argument of intelligent design, and some people use this argument, the fingerprint design, to say it's not possible, because if our fingerprints are randomly made, then what would happen is everyone would have different, but some might have some similarities. For example, if my fingerprints were made when I was in my mother's womb, and your fingerprints were made when you were in your mother's womb, then how does the fingerprinting of your body know that your fingerprints are different from everybody else on the planet? Like, for example, if it's being made right now, then who's overseeing that to ensure that when this baby's fingerprints come out, they are going to be different? Now, if it's happening randomly in one womb and randomly in another and randomly in millions of wombs, and there's no communication, therefore it will not occur that they would all be different. There is a high chance that one of them would be the same. Even this 1 in 64 billion number that we use, they say this is the random chance. You see, what they're doing is they're contradicting themselves. They're using mathematics, which is calculated equations and specific numbers, using mathematics to gain probability. Probability is chance, chance is random, mathematics is specific. How do you clash two opposites together? Mathematics does not rely on randomness. Mathematics is calculations, and it's the most specific knowledge that we have. Of all the branches of knowledge, mathematics is the most specific. Yet you will see all of science in all of our theories. What we use is math and probability together. This is a great contradiction. I propose that there is no such thing as random, and there is no such thing as chance. And not that I'm proposing it, it's kind of obvious when you look at the world. I mean, we came up with this idea of random. Random means we decided there's something random, but does random really exist? Random in its truth is simply an absence of knowledge. When we say something is random, what it means is we don't know how that happened. But it doesn't mean that it's random. Like if we say, for example, there is 1 in 1,000 chance of something happening, then what are we saying? What we're saying is that the factors that go together are going to lead to this happening 1 in 1,000. But when will it happen in 1,000? Well, somebody who knows would know. And I give the simplest example of tossing a coin, which is our basic random. You know, when you want to decide who's going to play first in a match, if you want to decide who's going to, do anything, we toss a coin, heads or tails. And we're like, heads. We say, oh, that was random. That means I didn't choose it, you didn't choose it. But really, could we not have calculated whether it was going to be heads or tails? And the simplicity of it is, all you need to know is the force with which you threw the coin into the air as you tossed it. Was it high force or low force? Did it go, how many meters did it go up in the air? As it was coming down, how did gravity calculate its descent and acceleration per second? And then how many revolutions occurred? And then when it landed in your hand, what direction did it land in would be based on what direction you tossed it in as it was turning. If I'm able to calculate newtons of force with which I launched the object, resistance of air, which is slowing it down, gravitational pull, which is accelerating it, revolutions per second, certainly you can calculate if it's heads or tails. So what does that tell me? That tells me that as a child, I thought it was random, but it wasn't random. What it was a lack of knowledge on my part. So if I look at these and I say there's a 1 in 64 billion chance, what did Francis Galton do really? Well, what he did was he looked at the variations and possibilities based on the swirls and whirls and arches. There are 3 types of shapes on your fingerprint: swirl, whirl, arches. He looked at those and he said, based on this, there's different variations. They say they are called minutiae. Minutiae, M-I-N-U-T-I-A-E, minutiae, are basically the differences. And fingerprint experts say that the average human being has 10,000 unique characteristics on their hands and feet that no other human being has. And just on your fingertips, you have 300 different characteristics. So Francis Galton said, you basically have 64 billion possibilities. So that's what he's saying, that there's 64 billion possibilities here. But were his calculations right? Probably not. Because right now, if there's 7 billion, we know that means with 10 fingers and 10 toes, that's 140 billion different prints in the world. And he said 1 in 64. So that means we're already looking at more than double. Now, what happens is when we say that, that's not chance. So do not take probability to mean random, because basically what it's saying is if you have cars and you give them numbers, then you say every car will have a number and that's it, no letters, and you go 1 to 1,000. And then what happens is you start with 0001, 0002, you'll eventually go to 999, and then you're going to end the story. So what happens is you have a limited number of cars you can make with that type of license plate. So you know how many you can have. That's what you did here. You said, well, these are the variations, so it's 1 in 64 billion. It's not like, oh, there's a random thing. So how is it possible that you could have 140 different prints on the planet right now, and your legal system only needs to see not 300 minutiae differences, but to convict someone in the court of law, you need 10 only. 10 unique features, and it is identified as that human being, and they can end up being convicted for the crime. So this shows you that, is it possible that that would be happening if I did not have a coordination with you and with you and with you? And that means that there was not one governing body overseeing the production of the fingerprints in every womb to ensure that every one of them is going to be different and unique. So he is the one who forms you in the womb. He says that I make your face in the womb. He is dictating it to the angels. And, you know, every mechanism in your body that Allah uses is somehow part of his means and his angels as well. So when he says angels, what do we really mean by that? Because anything that he uses as a mechanism that is working for him is also functionally an angel. He created openings between high skies and filled them with all classes of his angels. Some were in prostration, some do not kneel up, and they stay in prostration, others in ruku, and some of them are in qiyam. And then what happens is they are in that position for thousands or millions of years, never changing it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need worship. We have established that in the first part of our discussions. So these angels worshiping him are either showing us that he has infinite or millions and uncountable angels worshiping him. He does not need our sajda and our ruku and our qiyam. In a way, our sajda and ruku and qiyam is for us. So he needs us. He doesn't need us, we need him. So what's happening is, why are these angels worshiping Allah and the positions that they are in? Why do we not see them? So what happens is, we don't see things that are metaphysical. That means the angels are in a metaphysical realm, and our senses would not enable us right now. If he allowed us, then yes, our eyes would be able to see that. Would we see that on Qiyamah? Yes, it is said that we will see many things on the Day of Judgment that we are not able to see right now with our five senses. So I think one important lesson to take away from this is that he does not need our sajda and worship. When we are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Amirul Mu'mineen salatu wasalam was, asked, how should I pray with concentration? He said, pray as if you see him. He said, if I cannot do that, then Amirul Mu'mineen salatu wasalam said, pray as if he is seeing you. So, that we do that. I find that sometimes we also pray, to remind ourselves. Prayer is a reminder for you as well. So everything I am saying, even if just you hear it, I find much benefit in it. And that means that we have to remind ourselves, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We have to remind ourselves, Subhana Rabbil Azim wa bihamdih. So I find in prayer now, I'm gravitating towards talking to myself and all of the clay inside of me. So every cell in me is aware of this, because inside of you, Allah has created you from different clays that he has mixed together. And we'll come to that in a moment as we come into Hazrat Adam's discussion, alayhi salam. So yes, the angels are doing this. They do not sleep. They do not get tired. They are not forgetful. So indeed, all of that is happening as well. The angels are working to bring his message. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen angels to bring the message because Angels he created for his work because he did not put in them certain desires and temptations that he has put into human beings. But what happened then, because those desires and temptations weren't there, therefore they are good at being ameen with amanat and carrying the message, bringing it from the arsh, for example, to the prophets on the earth, as we see. However, because they did not have temptations and desires, they did not go through tests as we went through tests. And because they did not go through tests like us, what happened was they did not achieve the status that the human being can achieve. So it is interesting that Allah, despite making the angels sinless, and despite making them without going to these temptations, he has still made the forgetful one, the sinful one, the one who will make mistakes. He has allowed him or her, the human being, to actually have an elevated status compared to the angels. As we will see in the creation of Hazrat Adam, where the status of Hazrat Adam is shown in relation to the angels in terms of sajda. So therefore, the status of the human being raised because of the fact that they can be tempted. So that shows us that the examinations and temptations in our life are to elevate our status. It becomes much easier, though still difficult, to go through the tests of life when we realize that at the end of each test, our status is being raised. When we are studying for an exam that is going to raise our status at work, and it will give us a raise that we can see in numbers on our paycheck, and it will give us more benefits and more, perhaps more authority. It is so concrete that we are able to very much envision it, strive for it, and get it. When it is metaphysical, we find it hard unless the more we believe in the metaphysical, the easier it becomes. This means that when we are facing tests in life, we sometimes don't realize it. So what happens is we think that, oh, this is a musibat, a hardship upon me. However, it is a test. And if it is a test, then will we come out of this test closer to Allah or further away from him? So at night, we ask ourselves as we lie down to sleep, have I gained more nearness to him or not? Because nearness to him is something we always strive for, and it is something that is ever increasing, which means there is never a limit, which means that we can keep on gaining nearness, which means that we can elevate ourselves every day. If that happens, then we may wake up in the morning and say, oh Allah, give me tests, but give me tests that I can pass and that will allow me to become a better believer in you and to become closer to you. So we see the angels are bringing these messages, and they are also protectors of creatures. It is said that angels are perhaps in one hadith, there's a reference to how some angels protect the young, for example, and some babies. Sometimes you see little ones about to fall down, and then suddenly they don't. And it is said that perhaps an angel did. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he intends to keep a person alive for a certain time, then nothing can harm them. And if he intends to take their soul and they should return to him, then nothing can save them. And Amir al-Mu'mineen said that, right? When he said that if Allah has willed my death, when he would go onto the battlefield without armor, and someone said, where is your armor? He said, if Allah has willed my death, then nothing can save Ali from it. And if Allah has not, then nothing can bring death to Ali. So, there's a beautiful resignation there, and just resigning yourself to his will and his authority in that. And so protection, guards of the doors of the gardens of paradise. So we see there is a protectorship of the angels as well. The angels are going to be seen in abundance on the day of judgment as you walk into heaven. Among them are those whose steps are fixed on earth, but their necks are protruding into the skies. These are the ones that we have not seen yet. Perhaps one of a scientific mind may choose to take this and convert it into an energy source that is emanating from the earth and moving up. When Amir al-Mu'mineen describes the revolutions of the moon and the sun, he mentions that there is a force that is whirling around them, and it is a constant turning force that they are within. It's incredible. If you have seen the model of the universe right now that is based upon how the galaxies are moving in relation to each other, then you will find that the sun is doing tawaf of a central point of our known universe. And it spins around it, you know, every like 40 to 50 million years, I believe the number was, or it may have been more. It's eluding my mind right now. But it's a very, very large amount of time which takes the sun to revolve once. That means the sun is turning, but while it's turning, it is also moving forward in a spiral. And as it's moving forward in a spiral, all the planets that are revolving around the sun are turning and also moving around it. So what ends up happening is the sun is leading and the planets are following in a spiral. So they're all moving together. It's an incredible animation that they've shown. If you just, if you happen to have taken a look at it, or you do decide to search it, you will see in the current motion of the solar system model that we have right now. It's incredible, and it talks about, and subhanahu wa ta'ala says that everything will return to its original. So we're seeing that's happening to the sun as well. There must have been a starting point, and it's going to come back to that. So is perhaps, this referring to some physics force that is from here to the sky? Perhaps. Are there forces that are, when Amir al-Mu'mineen talks about the ozone layer, he says the outside is fixed, the inside is moving, and we see the outside is like a glass shell, but on the inside, we see the other layers of the clouds are constantly revolving. So in this beautiful design, we are seeing there are probably pillars and forces that might be described here. So is it possible that it's actually, what we interpret as a physics force, they are describing here as an angel? Is that possible? That's certainly possible. Is it possible that maybe some things that are angels may actually be seen by us in a scientific way? The angels that are writing our information down, I think there's definitely a metaphysical possibility that what they are writing down over here is being written by an angel sitting on my shoulder with a pen and paper. I know that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to do that, he can certainly do that. Is it possible that my DNA is recording everything, and that's what is meant by the angel? That if Allah wants that to be the case, I think that is a possibility as well. Because I don't have metaphysical eyesight, and and whatever we find in ahadith we are able to relate to, but not all questions were posed. There may be scientific questions now that we don't know. Did you know that back in, maybe if we go back to the early days of DNA discovery, DNA that you pass to your children and we pass to our offspring is taken from these cells that are in the testes and ovaries. And these cells contain DNA that was thought to be unchanged. That means that it stays the same because it's in the ovary of a mother, in the testis of a father. It is sitting inside a container that is not affected by the rest of our body. So when sunlight, for example, hits someone's skin and Allah, God forbid, na'uzubillah, gives them a cancer, then that has changed the DNA in the cells of their skin, but not in the cells of the ovaries and testes, which means that that parent would still pass on the pure DNA to their offspring. And that was the idea. So the idea was that when we're born, we have these egg cells and sperm cells that will be given to the offspring, and they develop in developmental stages of our biology, but they are not affected by, there's a curtain around them. They are not affected by the rest of my body. So whatever happens to me, I will still give that same pure DNA. But actually, we are now finding something very different. We are finding that our habits and our life changes and alters the DNA that is sitting in the ovaries and testes. That is incredible because we do not have an idea of the cause and effect and mechanism of it. So if somebody is, for example, in a life of crime, if somebody is in a life of addictions or other, or stress, or anything we do, activities we do in our life affects our DNA that we will give to our child as well. And that was something that was very, very eye-opening, because, we understand, therefore, then our responsibility becomes so much bigger. Now what happens is things that I do will affect me, but will also affect my children. And it will affect their children and their children. So how big is the responsibility upon us? That means that we have to make sure and ensure that our actions are in accordance with Islam. Otherwise, we may see the effect on our own children. And that is why, and that is one of the benefits of having children. In other words, what if we didn't have children? Well, if we didn't have children, then we wouldn't get that wonderful opportunity to correct ourselves. Having children has given me the opportunity to realize that I need to be a role model for them, which means that I have to in some way correct myself. So when we look at, DNA here at these angels, maybe DNA is recording it. It's definitely possible. Light rays or sound waves or light waves are always in the universe. It is said that on the day of judgment, you will see a screen, a moving picture of everything that happened. Does that mean I need to have a Zoom meeting and a video, and I need to have a screen there? So one angel will bring a projector, one angel will bring a screen, then they will play the movie for you. That's your life. Or is it already here? The energy around us is preserving everything. It is simply a matter of accessing it, right? What happens when the Imam raises his two fingers? That was fascinating to me. In many hadiths, we see the raising of the two fingers. And then between the two fingers, now what is coming through is what is really being seen. So, Hazrat Salman Muhammadi is with Amir al-Mu'mineen. Oh, Master, look and see how there are so many Muslims now doing Hajj and Umrah and so on, Tawaf. And when Amir al-Mu'mineen looks, says, oh, Salman, do not be fooled by the numbers. If you look between my fingers, you will see most of them are in the form of animals. And it is only those who are humans who think, who have intellect, who use aql. And so therefore, is there an energy source between the Imam's fingers? Because everyone radiates their own energy. Your electromagnetism, for example, what kind of nur does the Imam have, and what energy are they radiating that is causing that energy between the fingers that is causing them to look that way? I think that there might be something there, something worth considering. A youngster, for example, said, why do we point our finger like this? It just looks silly, I don't do that anymore. And I said, what do you do? And he said, I put my hand on my chest, like, because I'm saying salam, or I go like this and I say salam. I want to make a salam gesture. I don't want to point my finger. And so, but I've seen the elders doing that, and I told them that you need to realize that there's metaphysical mechanisms that you may not understand, but there may be wisdom in it. For example, we know this is the finger of Shahada. We know that this finger is raised for bearing witness. In embryology, did you know that the first thing to be formed, because as a baby is forming, the arm starts to come out as a budding entity. It grows out. As it grows out, the first thing to grow is the index finger. Embryology has shown that the first part of your arm that grows out is your index finger. And the index finger is the same finger as the finger of Shahada. And some people in Salah will even raise this finger when they're giving Shahada. And so that finger is and if we raise it for ziyarat, then we are basically raising it for that reason. Is it possible that there may be, light, nur, metaphysical energy that is produced by you when you say those words, that comes out from this finger, that reaches the ziyarah location, that reaches your Imam? I do not think that there's any solid reason that one can say, no, that's impossible. But when you look at all of the different things we don't understand in metaphysical energy, very possible. Here, we have pillars that are these angels, pillars of energy. Maybe. We know that, for example, in the physical, forget about the metaphysical, because pillars of energy might be physics or metaphysics, but look at the mountains. Amazing. It was incredible. I was there was this one documentary on social media that I saw an ad for, some kind of a movie documentary. I didn't watch it, but the title caught my mind, caught my eye. And the title was 14 Peaks, I think, something like that. 14 something, I don't remember. 14 Bulandia, basically. My mind translated into Urdu and I forgot what it was, but 14 heights, 14 peaks. And I was thinking, 14 Bulandia, what is this, So I looked at the documentary, just the advertisement on there to see what it was. And it was about a gentleman from Tibet who has planned in 6 months to climb the 14 mountains. And I said, why 14 mountains? And it said there are only 14 mountains that are above 8,000 kilometers on the earth. And the mountains, if you look at Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he describes the creation of the earth, he says that the mountains are pillars that help to keep the earth in its place. And that helped to keep that balance between earth water, between the earth's crust and the earth's core, the harder surface on top, the molten and liquid core. And the mountains serve as pillars, and they also serve to balance out the depth of the ocean. Where the earth is flat, then it goes deep. And where it goes deep, it needs to be balanced by elevations. So is it a coincidence that there are 14 Bulandia in the world? Of course not. Nothing happens in coincidence. So even the mountain peaks are 14, and Allah chose 14 by which he created everything as well. So we see that, when it says their shoulders go up to the divine throne. So it shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make angels of the smallest size or the most, we could say, inconceivably large size. And I wanted to get through the angels a little quicker, simply because I was thinking that Hazrat Adam's discussion there's a lot of concrete matter here that, that relates to us, and things that we can, perhaps less metaphysical, I suppose, less about the abstract understanding of divine unity and Tawheed. And so, when we speak of Hazrat Adam's creation, we see a very beautiful description by Amir al-Mu'mineen. It would show that someone who was either watching or someone who was doing would only know this as it occurs. And we do come from clay. So it's interesting to see that the clay that is mentioned in the Quran, which is mentioned as teen, and we see clay upon the earth as well, although sometimes what we describe as clay on the earth is, silicon based. The elements of the periodic table that make our universe and our planet. We as human beings are primarily made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And even in chemistry, you will see a beautiful symmetry in it, I think. Carbon is number 6. And when we look at carbon, it has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, giving it a weight of 12. And I don't think that 12 is a coincidence either. The number 12 seems to have a very, very important mathematical significance in the creation of the universe. Although many allude to the number 19 being the secret number of the universe, there's certain importance in the number 19 as well when it comes to calculating diameters of planets and ratios of different stars. 19 comes in. I mean, a mu'min might say 19 would come in because 1 is the number of Tawheed and 9 is the number of Bibi Zahra salamullah alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. But it is said that we are made from, and our great Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, also mentions, the 12 minerals of the earth that you are that composite you. So we are made mainly of the elements that are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. These are the main elements that make us, along with some other elements as well that come into play, like nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium. But when we look at life itself, it's primarily carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And carbon is really that 12 atomic weight element. And water is incredible because water is H2O, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, and oxygen is incredible because oxygen is what gives fire as well. So what's amazing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the same elements that he created fire from, also used oxygen to create water. And we see that the jinn are designed from fire-based, and we are designed water-based. So jinn will have a primary, a high amount of oxygen within them. Our body is, about the same amount of water that is found on the earth. The average person having about 70% water, as we see the earth is 70% water as well. So there's an incredible parallel between us and the planet that we live on. And it is said that our clay was taken from various places and mixed together, and then we come into being. And what happens is the clay within inside of us is also very much from different places. Although the discussion here is to be purely scientific, but there are some important metaphysical points as well here that I feel that perhaps people who tend to want to listen to very specific scientific evidence-based things that can be explained may not appreciate it as much, but I find it useful when it comes to understanding what's happening around me. And in me, I would say rather. And the Maqbul Ahmad Delvi, a very, I would say, a respected scholar in the Shia faith as well, and a convert, and residing in India, and a very nice tafsir. And the tafsir is very, we could say, it has a lot of things in it that might not be diplomatic when it comes to other sects of Islam. So it's even gotten a status of being banned as well at some points. But it's definitely a tafsir that really pretty much has our aqidah in it, And what happens is, in that, when they talk about the clays, one time Imam Jafar Sadiq salatu wasalam mentions a few points about the clay, and it comes up in the Surah Baqarah discussion of Hazrat Adam's creation, where the second surah, verse number 30 onwards, where we see that happening, and in the the tafsir, and also in the Zamima, some of this comes up, which is the side notes that the author has collected. And in that there's a hadith, and it says that Imam said that Allah did not allow our inner being to be affected by the outside. He hid our sins, which means that if we don't have aqidah and we don't have iman, then it may not show on our faces, because he mixed up the clays of the mu'mins and the kafirs. And so what happened was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew who is denying him and who is accepting him from the beginning and before the beginning, of course. And he even took our testimony on the day of Yawm al-Ast, as it says, if you just refer to Surah Araf, Surah number 7, verse number 172, you'll see that there, where he took our oath. So just saying that from the beginning he knew, and the clays were separate, but then he mixed them together. And in mixing them, there was a big discussion there as well, in how it allowed probably a little more chance for people who didn't say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah over there on Yawm al-Ast to say it now. He mixed the clay together. Our Imam says in that, as is quoted in that Zamima that I mentioned right now in reference, our Imam says that the reason why these people who disbelieve and who are munafiqeen and who are the enemies of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt have faces that you are able to tolerate and see is because the clay of the mu'min is mixed in them. And the reason, and that's why everybody kind of looks the same. Otherwise, if it was based upon your iman, there would be such a big difference in the way we look. And I thought that was very important, because what happens is sometimes, we in my culture especially, we say kitna nurani chehra hai, and sometimes when people say nurani, nuraniyat hoti bhi hai, because sometimes if kehte hain nurani chehra hai, basically it's just a fair skinned person. we tend to connect fair-skinned with nurani, you know, and fair-skinned and nur is different things. Fair skin is just the pigment and the melanin inside of us, right? I mean, like, you know, is it darker pigmentation going to mean we're not nurani? No, certainly not. Or if you go to a nation where everybody's mainly light-skinned, are they all going to be nurani as well? So very, you know, there's a mix of clay inside of us. And so sometimes we have to talk to that clay so that, and that's the challenge. The challenge is that, you know, if you have this different clay inside of you, there's going to be these constant desires erupting inside of you, but you as the person who's in control, because over here, Amir al-Mu'mineen salatu wassalamu alayhi is going to give a beautiful description of our intellect and our aql. And I think that's one of the most amazing things to take away from this. So, you know, so we'll come to that. Although we are coming a little bit towards the end of our discussion here, Mustafa Saab was kind and said I can take as much time as I want. On the schedule, I believe 11:30 was the time. So I'll just take another couple of minutes and then I'll stop. And, you know, just ending here with this hadith. And what we see over here is, and this is the first one from Nahjul Balagha. It's a very important one for us in our times, I think, because fitnahs, this is the age of fitnah. This is the time when fitnahs are going to increase. This is the time when they're going to occur at every level. And Amir al-Mu'mineen salatu wassalamu alayhi has said that be like the adolescent camel is translated here. But when we look at the Arabic word, ibn al-labun, and ibn al-labun is usually mentioned when the camel is like in the first 2 years of life, where they basically are not old enough to give milk nor old enough to ride, meaning that they don't have a function for other people yet. Other people cannot use them. So it shows that we should not be used in a fitnah. And I find that that is happening very much. And I'm not even talking about the fitnahs that we see in the world around us. Much cruelty happening around us. Many things that are just incredible that, you know, point to our society. Just in Pakistan, when we look at just what's happened recently with how we see a society is able to inflict such cruelty upon one individual while others are bystanders. Interestingly, 100 or more are recording with their cell phones, yet only one is there who is trying to help them. It should have been the other way around if you go back centuries. Probably there was a time, or even now in some places, we see that 99 would have helped and one would have hurt, but here we see 99 hurting and one wanting to help. The decadence of our society. And, you know, what is that? That is the sheep and herd mentality. That is the mentality that when someone screams, we just run and we join in and we do what is happening. We never stop to think. We start being used. The instigators would have been a few, but what happens at the end of it is what we see is incredible. And the hypocrisy of it is that the paper, you know, that was there apparently said Labbaika ya Hussein, you know, and this is the same mentality, the same people that martyred, you know, Imam Hussein, you know, that same mentality is over here, that in his name now they're going to do it, you know, and to get angry at a paper with Mullah Hussein's name being ripped up, yet you did not get angry when Mullah Hussein was torn to pieces by Yazid's army. That is incredibly hypocritical. What can one say? But, you know, here I would rather talk about, you know, the Shias and what we do on social media and what we do when we talk to each other. And in general, what we do is we hear something and we pass it on. That means we are being used for the fitnah. We get angry. We get jazbati. We let our emotions take over. We do not think with intellect. And how many times when someone complains to you about someone else, when someone says something about what is happening, when someone tries to enrage and anger us, we have to always ask ourselves the question, are we being used or not? On the one hand, haq ke liye bolna, we have to speak up for what's right. We have to, you know, do it with our mouth, with our face, with our tongue. That is different. But when we are just being used and instigated, many times you don't even realize it. So the first step is we have to realize, what does fitnah mean? And then we have, and fitnah is evil for the sake of evil, fighting for the sake of fighting. And I think that in this day and age, you could probably say that any argument or any fight that's not going to lead to a conclusion or betterment or a resolution is basically a fitna. So what happens is we have 5 or 6 fitnas of our aqidah that we'd like to fight about, and that's what you'll see happening. And any speaker who touches on those topics will become viral, and that is sometimes a strategy to become viral. And then everybody who's buying into it is adding fire to the flame, wind to the fire. So I think that very important for our young ones, especially, and those who get involved into these debates and discussions, see if there's going to be any resolution or conclusion possible, number one. And number two, make sure you're not being used. Make sure that people are not just fanning the flames. And that's, and do we not see that happening, when we look at, for example, in Medina as well, when we look in Medina, then what we see is there is a lady who is standing in a court. And as she is standing in the court, you will notice that she is the one who is called Siddiqa. She is the one whom the Prophet stood up to greet every time she walked in and asked her to sit in her place. She is the one whom the Prophet ﷺ took with them as the honest witnesses when we see Mubahala. And yet she is standing, and how long has it been since her father has been buried? The Prophet has not been buried even 3 days. And we see what has happened. The people who would jump at anything the Prophet says. If the Prophet says there is an army behind the mountain, they will believe it. Now what is happening? They are quietly listening to what she is saying. It is said that when she spoke, and what condition did she enter the court in? The condition in which she had already been injured. That means that we see that we were already injured. We were barely able to walk, but we stood there for hours. And when we look at that condition, what do we see happening there? What we see happening there is that there are sounds where some people are starting to cry, but no one is standing up for what she is saying. There are her children with her. The Prophet's wife is with her, and her dear Kaniz is with her. But amongst the people of Medina, कोई भी आगे आके नहीं बोला. बीबी उस दरबार में घंटों खड़ी रही.